few years ago, my 6-month pregnant wife Rachel and I were fortunate enough to buy our first home. It wasn't big, but it was ours. In an effort to cut costs and keep the price as low as possible, we waived the home inspection. I know this isn't something that people advise, but we just didn't have the money. We loved our new little home and moved in as soon as we could. Since my wife was already out of work, she spent the first couple of days getting the house organized while I was working. The first day she was there alone while I was working, she said that she heard strange noises coming from the basement. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, so she ignored it. By the third or fourth time she heard something down there, she was legitimately freaked out. She opened the door and thought she heard something move, so she shut the door and put a chair under the doorknob as a makeshift lock. She told me she was too afraid to go down and look. Rachel has always been a textbook overthinker and an anxious person. She told me that there was a part of her that thought she was just being crazy and hearing things. That's why she didn't call me at work and just waited for me to get home. When I got home, I went into the basement and looked around. There was nothing down there except for some random boxes of storage. I told her that she was just getting used to being in a new house, and that she would have to get used to all the weird noises that houses make. She agreed. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night because now I thought I heard something coming from the basement. I jumped out of bed and just stood in the bedroom and tried to listen. I didn't want to wake up my wife. I crept over to the vent and put my ear on it. I didn't have to worry about waking up Rachel because she was already awake. She scared the crap out of me when she started talking to me. She told me that she had been awake for about an hour. She said she heard what sounded like a door creak open. I asked her why she didn't wake me up, and she told me she thought she was just hearing things. She figured she was just on edge from earlier. I left the bedroom and went downstairs. Nothing looked out of place. I did notice that the basement door was slightly open, so I shut it. I knew that I shut it earlier, so I figured maybe a draft of some kind forced it open. For the rest of the night, we both tossed and turned. There were several times throughout the night that we heard a loud noise coming from the basement. I called into work that morning so I could stay home with her. We were both exhausted. I tried telling myself that it's just a new house and it's going to take a little while to get used to all the noises that unfamiliar houses make. We spent that day getting more stuff unpacked. Rachel was joking with me that we lived in a real haunted house. We both laughed about it since we were both big horror movie fans. She even suggested watching Paranormal Activity after dinner. That night, we went to bed early since neither of us slept well the previous night. Rachel ended up waking up around midnight. She told me she was having a nightmare that someone was hiding in the closet. It scared her so badly that it woke her up out of a deep sleep. Once she was awake, she just laid there in bed for a few minutes, staring at the mostly dark room. Then she saw something that genuinely freaked her out. She said that at first she didn't think much of it, thinking it was just a weird shadow in the doorway that resembled a person. Then the shadow moved out of the doorway. It scared Rachel so badly that she actually screamed, which woke me up. She was crying and told me that she saw someone standing in the doorway. I couldn't believe it. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my softball bat out of the closet. I started walking around the house, and once again, I didn't see anything except that stupid basement door was open again. After searching the entire house, I shut the basement door and went back to the bedroom. I felt terrible telling Rachel that nobody was in the house because I didn't want her to think that I thought she was crazy. I did believe she saw something, I just didn't know exactly what she could have seen. She said that she was 100% sure that the shadow she saw was a person. Once again, we barely slept the rest of the night. When we both finally were about to fall asleep, we heard a loud crash come from somewhere in the house. Rachel was crying, and I was honestly scared as well. I just couldn't explain what was going on. I locked the bedroom door and basically sat there with the baseball bat until morning. Once it was morning, we left the bedroom. Rachel made coffee, and I searched the house again. When I went down into the basement, I noticed that several of the boxes had been knocked over. I went upstairs and told Rachel what I had found. I asked her if it was possible that animals could have knocked the stuff over. She didn't think that was the case. I just didn't know if squirrels or raccoons were capable of this kind of thing. I was almost hoping that we had an animal of some kind in the basement. At least that way we would know what was making all the noise, and then we could properly deal with it. While we were drinking our coffee and talking about it, she said she wanted to go downstairs and see the knocked over boxes for herself. Once we got down there, we looked around, and other than the boxes, nothing looked out of place. We started picking up the boxes and stacking them back up neatly. After I picked up the last box, I noticed something weird on the ground. There was some dirt that I didn't notice before. I looked a little closer and saw a faint dirt trail that led near the furnace. The dirt looked like it had been crawled through instead of stepped on. When I got over near the furnace, I saw that there was another small patch of dirt that led to a small nook behind the furnace. Behind the furnace in the small nook was a little door. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a small crawl space down here that neither one of us knew about. It was so hidden that if you didn't know it was there, you would never see it. You have to crawl a little bit just to get to it. I was gonna open it, but Rachel stopped me. She was scared that if I opened it, someone might be in there. I told her that there wasn't a chance of that happening, but I was secretly terrified. Just to be safe, Rachel went upstairs and I grabbed my bat. I slowly opened the door to the crawl space. I still can't believe what I saw when I opened the door. Inside the crawl space was an old, dirty throw pillow, a small fleece blanket, and some empty food wrappers. Well, it was a lot of empty food wrappers. But even more disturbing and terrifying than that was the other thing I found in there. Inside the small secret crawl space was one of our family photo albums. Rachel loves to take photos of everything, and she prints all of her pictures out and puts them in photo albums. The photos in this album were specifically from the first few years we dated. I grabbed the photo album and ran out of there. I told Rachel to get out of the house and drive to her parents just in case. I stayed behind and called the police. When they arrived, they searched the entire house and didn't find anyone either. I wanted Rachel to stay at her parents' house that night just in case whoever this was reappeared, but she insisted on sleeping at home with me. She slept on the couch in the living room, and I basically stayed awake all night waiting to hear something, but for the first time since moving into the house, I didn't hear anything that night. The next day, I ended up sealing the crawl space door shut, changing all the locks in the house, and installing 2 motion cameras outside. We never had another incident in the house after that. We currently still live here, and Rachel's pregnant with our second child. That's what made me think of the story again. Now that it's been several years since all this, when I reflect on what I found that day, I can't help but come to the conclusion that someone was living down there in that room, at least for a few nights while we were in the house. I guess in hindsight, if we had that home inspection, maybe we would have known about the room. I have no idea why they had our photos, and I don't think I want to know. The one thing that freaks me out more than anything is that Rachel swears that she saw someone standing in the doorway that night, and that it wasn't her imagination. I don't know the reason why they decided to just up and leave, but I'm happy they did. In the summer before going into 8th grade, I experienced one of the most horrifying weekends of my life that I still can't explain. At that time in my life, I didn't have a lot of friends. I would spend most of my time with my cousin Robbie. He would usually come to stay overnight at my house since he lived in a small apartment with my aunt. He liked coming over to my house just because we had a lot more freedom. During that summer vacation, my aunt and her fiancé bought a new house. Robbie was excited that he would finally have a big enough space that I could stay over there for once. Once they moved into the new house, we set up a plan for me to stay over there for the entire weekend. We were pumped to play video games all weekend and just eat a disgusting amount of food. I didn't care about much else at that time in my life. In the late afternoon on a Friday, my mom dropped me off at the house after she got out of work. The house was unfortunately not around the corner. It took about 45 minutes to get there, but it was awesome once I arrived. The house was in the middle of nowhere, which I found pretty cool. It was also a massive house. It was older and a little run down, but still a huge house. One of the things that Robbie loved about the new house was how much land they had. The backyard was a massive field, and beyond the field was a bunch of trees and forested land. The first thing Robbie did when I got there was give me the tour. I'm not kidding when I say that I was genuinely concerned I might get lost in the house later. Not only was it a huge house, but it was also like a maze. The house had 3 separate staircases that led upstairs and 2 that led to the basement. It had so many rooms that I didn't even bother to count them. It was one of those old houses that I feel like they don't even make houses like that anymore. I remember feeling almost jealous that Robbie got to live here. It was like he had his own wing of the house. After Robbie gave me the tour, we went back into the kitchen where my mom and aunt were still talking. I remember hearing my aunt say to my mom that they had way too much room in the house for just the 3 of them. But they couldn't pass up the deal. I didn't care much for the reason, so I didn't stick around to hear why it was so cheap. Instead, Robbie and I went outside to throw the football around. We threw the ball around for a while and then went inside when my mom was leaving. At the same time, my aunt's fiance was getting home with pizza and wings. After we ate, we went to Robbie's huge bedroom and started on our video game marathon. We played for hours. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was late when we finally decided to pass out and go to sleep. Robbie's room was big enough that he had a bed on each side of the room, so I didn't have to sleep on the floor. The bed I was sleeping in was right next to the closet. We must have both been tired because we fell asleep right away. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but I don't think it was very long. I'm not even sure how or why I woke up, but I was awake. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. It was mostly dark in there. He had this blue light from his computer that was giving off some light, and that was about it. When I put my head back down on the pillow, I noticed that the closet door was now open. When I got into bed originally, I was sure that the door was closed, or at least mostly closed. Now it was wide open. I whispered over to Robbie to see if he was awake. I figured that maybe he woke up and grabbed a sweatshirt or something from the closet. Robbie mumbled something as if he was half asleep when I whispered his name. I sat there for a few minutes, unable to fully relax. I wasn't scared, I just felt like something was off, and with the door open, I didn't feel great. I worked up the courage to get back up and close the closet door. As I was shutting the door, I swear I thought I heard someone whisper, "Hey." I shut the door so fast and ran back to the bed. I was awake for almost the rest of the night. I couldn't calm my nerves. It didn't make any sense for somebody to be in that closet. It took the entire night, but I convinced myself that my imagination and being in the dark room just played a trick on my mind. In the morning, I finally fell back asleep. It didn't last long because Robbie woke me up because his mom made breakfast. While we were eating, Robbie was talking about all the stuff we were going to do that day. I felt bad because I could barely focus on what he was saying. I was so tired from the previous night. I will say that the tiredness didn't last very long. Once I ate and showered, I was starting to feel like myself again. Nothing of note happened during the day. That night, my aunt had a few of her friends over, and they brought over their kids who were roughly the same age as us. We decided to play hide and seek in the big house. I don't know if there's like an official rule book for hide and seek, but we played a version of the game where one person is it, and when they find someone, they have to physically tag them, and then that person is also it until there's one survivor left. It was fun, and we could only play this game on nights like this when several people were able to play. There were 7 of us playing. When we started playing, I wasn't designated as it, so I was able to hide. The only rules we established were that we had to be in the house, no hiding in the living room, which is where all the parents were, and no one was allowed to hide in my aunt's bedroom. We shut that door so everyone couldn't get confused in the big house. I went into one of the unused rooms to hide. Inside the room was a bunch of office equipment and boxes. My aunt's fiance was going to make this room his office. I went into the closet in that room to hide. Hanging in that closet were several of his coats. I thought it was perfect because I could literally hide between the coats and be completely hidden. I left the closet door cracked open so I could peek through the opening and see if anyone came into the room. Several minutes passed and no one came into the room. I wasn't overly concerned because the house was so big. It would probably take a while to look everywhere. Then I heard the office door creak open. I looked through the cracked door and I didn't see anyone. From my vantage point, I was able to see the entire room, so I couldn't figure out why the door opened and nobody was there. I looked away, and then I heard footsteps walking around the room. I looked through the door opening again, and still nobody was there. It was the craziest thing. It sounded like the footsteps were coming from right outside the door. I ducked back down in the closet. It didn't make sense to me, but someone was clearly right near the door, even if I couldn't see them. I backed up against the wall of the closet door and tried to remain hidden. I still wasn't scared. Even though I couldn't explain what was happening, I figured it still had to be someone from the game. I was holding my hand over my mouth, trying to make as little noise as possible. The footsteps now sounded like they were directly outside the closet door. Then I heard it. A soft whisper from the other side of the door. All it said was, "I see you." I was completely frozen. I didn't recognize that voice. I just stood there waiting for the door to open, but it never did. I don't know how long we had this standoff, but it felt like several minutes at least. During that time, I heard heavy breathing coming from the other side of the door, but they never said anything else. You know when you could just feel someone standing there? That's what I felt in this moment. Then, without warning, the footsteps left the room fast. It was like they ran away. It was silent after that. I didn't hear anything except my own breathing. I was too scared to leave. While I was standing there, the closet door slowly opened on its own. The loud creaking sound was like nails on a chalkboard for me in that moment. Once the door was open, nobody was there. I was just standing in the doorway like an idiot. That's when Robbie ran by the room, shouted that he saw me, and ran to tag me. Even after I got tagged, I still just stood there trying to process what just happened. It didn't make any sense to me. I came to my senses a moment later and continued playing the game. I didn't want everyone there to think I was afraid, even though I was scared out of my mind now. We played for a while after that, but I made sure I hit in easy-to-find spots that were close to other people. I didn't want to be alone. That night, after everyone left, Robbie fell asleep right away. I didn't want to go anywhere near the bed that was next to the closet door from the night before. I forced myself to stay awake and play video games. At like 3:20 in the morning, I'll never forget that exact time, I heard a creaking sound. I looked over from the TV where I was sitting, and the closet door was just opening on its own again. I just sat there and watched the door open. Once it was fully open, I couldn't see anything inside the closet other than darkness. Then I heard the breathing again. It almost sounded intentionally loud. I backed up against Robbie's bed, which was on the other side of the room. I sat there like a statue and stared into that dark closet for the rest of the night, just waiting for something or someone to jump out at me, but nothing ever did. On Saturday morning, I called my mom and told her to come pick me up early because I didn't feel well. I was supposed to stay all day, but I just wanted to get out of this house. When my mom picked me up, she asked me how the weekend was, and I told her the truth. I told her I didn't like it there, and that I had this horrible feeling all weekend that someone was watching me. I saw my mom make a weird face. She asked me if I heard my aunt or her fiancé talk about how they got the house so cheap, and I didn't. She shook her head and told me never mind. It was years later, several years after I graduated from high school, that this story came up again. That's when my mom told me for the first time that my aunt was able to buy the house so cheaply because, apparently, some brutal crime involving murder happened in the house 10 years before my aunt bought it, and it had been empty ever since. My mom thought that I must have overheard my aunt telling someone that, and that gave me some vivid nightmares that one weekend when I stayed there. However, these experiences I had were not nightmares. This was real. There was no doubt in my mind that I heard the voice, the breathing, and the footsteps. All of it. This wasn't in my head. This happened. Now, as an adult in my late 20s, I still can't explain it. I never stayed overnight at Robbie's house again after that night. I had been there a few times since, but always went home at night. To my knowledge, Robbie never experienced anything like that, and if he did, he never shared it with me. This story is weird and a bit unsettling. I don't even know if I would consider it scary or just outright disturbing. Maybe even a little sad. I'll start by saying that I'm not going to be using any real names in the story, just to protect the privacy of certain people, just in case. For my entire life, my mom's best friend has been a woman named Tammy. She's a successful real estate agent in the area. She helped my parents get a great deal on the house I grew up in. She's like a magician when it comes to real estate. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, and Tammy agreed to help me find my first house. It just so happened that she was about to put a house on the market that used to belong to the father of one of her oldest friends. He had passed away about a year before this, and the house was empty for a while before that. He didn't die in the house or anything like that, but the kids still kept the house in the family while the old man was in a retirement home. It's just that the kids don't live in the state anymore, and they didn't want to sell the house until he officially passed. Once he died and the kids finally got around to selling the house, they left it in Tammy's capable hands. Being the woman she is, she asked if I was interested in looking at the house first. Long story short, Tammy got a great deal on the house, and not long after, I officially became a first-time homeowner. Since it smelled old and musty in there, I decided to do some renovations before I officially moved in. I wanted to get the essential rooms done first so I could move in, and then I could slowly work on the rest of the house. One afternoon, after fixing up the kitchen, I decided to just walk around the house and get a feel for the place. It hadn't quite sunk in yet that I owned this house. One area of the house that I had barely seen was the attic. It was one of those drawstrings on the ceiling that you pulled, and when you did, a wooden ladder lowered, leading to a small attic. I knew it was there, I just never really cared to go up there since it was gross and covered in cobwebs and who knows what else. On that afternoon, I decided to go up there and see if there was any water damage or any other type of issue that I would need to address. While I was looking around, I stepped on a loose floorboard. I was about to just nail it down when I noticed something underneath it. I pulled up the board and found a notebook, some keys, and a small device that I later realized was a voice recorder. I remember thinking that this was so cool when I pulled them out. It was like finding a relic from the past in the house. I went back to the kitchen and tried to play the tape that was in the recorder, but it wouldn't work. It didn't take me long to realize that it ran on batteries, and the batteries were dead. I grabbed some new ones from my truck and tried to play the recording again. It worked. It was the voice of an old man. At first, it was kind of sweet. He was just recording his voice, saying things like his name, the date, and that he wanted to hear what his voice sounded like. Then the recordings took a hard turn and got weird. He sounded frantic all of a sudden. He kept saying that he doesn't know why they won't just leave him alone, that he was in danger and that nobody would help him. He kept mentioning his one daughter, I'll call her Claire, and saying that she wouldn't believe him. He would go from crying in the recording to screaming at the top of his lungs to laughing uncontrollably. It was unhinged. I stopped recording and started to flip through the notebook. It was almost the same as the recording. By that, I mean it started normal enough. It almost looked like a journal entry. It had the date, the time, and then just a small passage. Simple things like, tonight I ate a hamburger, it was delicious. After the small passage, that's where he would write a timestamp. I know that seems silly, but that's literally the kind of stuff it said. But just like the recordings, as I continued to flip through the notebook, it started to get crazier. One entry said, I want to eat Justin's arm, timestamped 1:18 a.m. on November 16th. I have no idea who Justin is or why the entries started to go off the rails like this. I started listening to the recordings again, and they just kept getting darker and weirder. In one of the recordings, he started talking about how the evil woman comes to visit him every night, and she won't leave him alone. After that recording, there were a lot of recordings of just mumbling, screaming, or laughing. I started to put the pieces together in my head. This poor man had lost his mind, and that's probably why his kids put him in a home until he passed away. Then I heard the final recording, and I wasn't so sure anymore. In the last recording, he sounded defeated and out of breath. He apologized for everything wrong and horrible he'd done in his life. He didn't give any details about that. Then he said the evil woman comes every night now, and she won't leave him alone. He then said that she can by no means find out what he locked away. That's what she's after. I heard him jingle the keys near the recorder. I assumed they were the keys I found under the floorboards. After that, he stopped talking for a few seconds, and you couldn't hear anything except dead air. I was just about to turn the recorder off when he whispered into the device that she's here now. Tell my children I love them. Then, right before the recorder shuts off, you can hear the cackle of a woman. It's only for a second or two before it gets cut off, but it was clear as day. It was an unnerving laugh, and clearly not the voice of this elderly man. I listened to that last part of the recording about 15 times, just so I could be certain that that's what I heard. After listening, I went to the last passage of the notebook that was filled out. All it said was, please, please, not tonight. Followed by the word, no, dozens of times. Then it was timestamped at 3:39 a.m. on December 26th. I called Tammy after all this and told her what I found. She came over and listened for herself. It made her feel uncomfortable and uneasy because she knew this man. She called his daughter and told her what I found in the attic, and the daughter was a bit creeped out. When they finally admitted him to a home, she said that the father she knew was barely left. He didn't talk much, and when he did, it was nothing indicating any of this stuff. She said the timestamp in the notebook was especially unsettling for her, because it was the next day, December 27th, that she came home to visit for the holidays with her family, and that's when he was basically unresponsive on the couch. If you can believe it, somehow this story gets even stranger. After they found him unresponsive on the couch, they took him to the hospital, assuming he had a stroke. But the doctors were never able to fully explain what happened to him. Why he had such a cognitive decline, and why he basically was a shell of a man at the end of his life. There wasn't a medical reason why, which made this harder for his family to accept and understand. What I didn't realize then was that Tammy didn't tell her about the horrible laugh that was at the end of the recording. She didn't want to upset her more. I didn't agree, so a few days later, I called the woman back up and told her about the end of the recording. Well, Tammy was right. This upset her so much that she flew back to town and asked if she could have the recordings, the notebook, and the keys, which I of course handed over. She thanked me for them and told me if she ever found any answers, she would let me know. I doubt she will, and if by some chance she does find answers, maybe I'll write an updated version of the story. I know the easy answer is to just say the man was clearly losing it, and this was just a record of him mentally declining. But if you could have seen the daughter's reaction to the laugh on the recording, you would also have that gut feeling like I do that something isn't right about this situation. Hopefully one day, that family will get the answers they desire.